Ecowise here. If you look at this cutaway here, they made this road here somewhere around 50 years ago, I believe. And they cut into this rock here to make the road. And you imagine they probably had big machines. It was 50 years ago, they could have had big kind of rah like they've got now that can eat mountains, you know, big diggers and stuff. They probably had a simpler kind of that. They used to do it by hand as well in the past, thousands of years ago by hand. But this is probably something mechanical that did this. And if you imagine afterwards, there's like nothing there. It's just the rock. And this rock is a mudstone, a marl. This rock was probably formed, this is the theory, this is the story. Geologically speaking, this rock is probably depends. It's probably something like 4 to 5 million years old, because this area was under the sea. That's their story. That's what people have. The evidence and the theories and the thinking is that that's the story of what happened in our landscape in the past. This area happened to be under the sea 4 or 5 million years ago. So this rock was formed under the sea, and you can see the strata if you look, these diagonal lines. So it's been tilted. This was at the bottom of the ocean in a muddy environment, because this would have been a shallow sea in what's now the plain of the River Po, the whole of northern Italy, some of the most fertile deep soils in the world. That was a sea up until about 4.5 million years ago, because the sea level was higher than it is now, right? You can imagine that. Now it's dropped down, it's coming back up again, but let's not go there. So this would have been just raw, exposed rock with no life visible. And then a process that in ecology they call primary succession happens, where life, ecosystems, seems to magically grow, generate or regenerate from damage. And in this case, the plants that are here now, we've got sedum, which has got these kind of, it's almost like a succulent. Here there's some wild thyme. Here there's various grasses and sedges. This yellow one here, we can see closer here if you come and check it out. Here, this one, or there, you can look at that. This one, beautiful, isn't it? Look at the colour of that, enjoying the sun. These flowers kind of close up in the evening when the sun goes. And if it's cold, they won't open up at all. And they just flower now. So this is, I'm trying to think, what is it? Potentilla reptans. Reptans means creeping. So this is creeping potentilla. In English, I'm trying to think what it is called. It'll come to me, but it doesn't matter. But this plant, you see, is also growing up there. And these plants here would not do well if this wasn't exposed rock. They would be outcompeted by other things that do really well. If there was deep soil, you would not find these. So these kind of plants need this kind of disturbed habitat. So it's really important to have different kinds of habitat to encourage and to let us have lots of different kinds of ecosystems. So that's biodiversity, right? Biodiversity at the ecosystem level leads to and is part of and relates to biodiversity at the species level. And of course, then different areas will have different individual populations of, say, this plant, this wild thyme. Maybe there's something similar happened over there on that hill over there. And over there, it's the same species, but it's been separated for a long time, and there'll be diversity at the genetic level within that population. That's important too. So what I'm talking about today is some processes that those of you who are in, I think you're in 4th and 5th grade level especially, you're going to be studying ecology, and I'm sure you're going to learn about primary succession. This is an example. Nobody's planted it, it's grown back. So nature is incredibly resilient and generative or regenerative. It comes back all by itself, and it's so cool. Just now I was showing you down at the bottom of this valley where there was that cutaway rock, the mudstone that was formed. They think the story is, because the story changes over time, right? But the latest story, just for the last 150 years or so, is this idea of uniformity, this idea that the way that the Earth is now geologically is based on processes that happened in the past and are still happening now. So if you're at the bottom of the sea, you can see sediment developing. And you could imagine after thousands or millions of years with great pressure, and sometimes with heat as well, they become stone. So sand can become sandstone. But here I'm in a different place. And this is, again, I want to point out the same sort of processes happening. These processes where they're called succession in ecology. This would be secondary succession here. But this was a house with a family living in it. I've even heard oral history of people that live in my village. The little nice, amazing old woman who tells me about the family that lived here in the Second World War, and there were 3 children, and the father used to drink and gamble, and he went off and he didn't come back, and the poor children were left here alone, and they were kind of starving, but they were taken care of and they were fine. But the house was abandoned, and look. So wherever you are now, you're maybe in a city or in a house or in a building, think about and look around you and look away that nature, even though when they built the house you're in, there wouldn't have been much nature left, especially if you're in the city somewhere. It's like, where's the nature? Well, just look at the way, even on your windowsill or on the doorstep or inside the house, spiders' webs, windowsill, lichens, mosses, insects, ladybirds. Look at the way that over time plants get a foothold, even in the places you wouldn't expect to find a plant, but they're there. They're called ruderal species. They can go into places that have been highly disturbed. And after a period, what happens? Look, this was a house with a garden, and like, imagine how it was. Now look at it. It's going back and becoming part of the process and part of the dance of the creation of matter and the energy and the whole thing. Look, it's kind of returning to what it came from. It's overgrown with trees and brambles, and there's just the last beam there. That's just the old chimney. The whole roof is gone. I saw this when it still had a roof about 15 years ago. It's gone. And these bricks are made from the soil here that were baked. They've been doing that since before Roman times here. So these bricks are made from the same material. The beam, the big beam, is probably made from oak. There are still oak trees here. So this, very soon, there'll be no sign that it was ever here. So what does that mean? Well, for me, it means that humans and nature are absolutely not separate. We often talk about a wild place and a cultivated place, or the city and the country. Those divisions, I think, are a bit artificial. So wherever you are, pay attention to the nature that's all around you. Especially look small, because those mosses and those lichens and those first plants are getting a foothold in. They're the primary producers, right? Those of you, you're studying that, a lot of you now. Ecosystems, primary producers. They catch the energy of the sun. Photosynthesis, right? Using the hydrogen from water they take up from their roots. Using the carbon from the carbon dioxide they take in through their leaves. And they mix it with the sunlight, creates everything that's biomass and material, sugars, and everything's added onto that, chemically speaking, to make the beautiful, amazing world. And stuff is made from air and from water and sunlight. All of the stuff that's living or has been living comes from that. By the way, important if you're talking about the carbon cycle and climate change, we've got to be aware of some of those long-term sinks that we're getting into, like fossil fuels, right? But we're not separate from nature. Have a look where you are and look how nature's colonizing and all around you. And you know what? This is also a sign that nature regenerates and heals and regains health. And our health, psychologically and physically, is related to knowing and accepting that we're part of this beautiful dance that we call nature. Bye bye.